How the 3 C's won the day. What are the 3 C's? Continuity, consistency, and camaraderie. That plus a whole lot more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for May 30th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show has grown each and every day, and that's because of you, Raider Nation. And believe me, it has grown in a quick amount of time. We definitely appreciate the daily support that we get. We big time appreciate it. Can't say it enough. We also appreciate my man Ari. Does a fantastic job, takes a ton of pride in the job that he does behind the scenes, making sure we're up on YouTube each and every day, to the point where he'll call me and say, hey man, if you haven't recorded the show yet, give me a couple minutes. Just give me 2 minutes. Give me a quick call. I just got a couple notes for you real quick, and we'll be golden. So hit me up. I mean, my man really takes control of it, and I appreciate that. Again, a guy that takes a lot of pride in his work, so you can shout him out. He's on Twitter, at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254, and you know you can always be part of the show, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts, tons of feedback that we've gotten is coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, we'll talk about those 3 C's. Again, continuity, consistency, and camaraderie, and how that won the day at OTAs on Wednesday. What do I mean by any of that? Oh, that'll all come up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, we'll hear from assistant head coach Marvin Lewis, a guy that I was really looking forward to talking to on Wednesday and got that opportunity. So we'll hear a few sound bites from him. Before we get into any of that, though, I do want to give a special shout out. I say that this show is fueled by Raider Nation. The show is for Raider Nation, and we are a family. We are a family through good times. We are a family through bad times. And, well, bad times is upon us, and it happens sometimes, but we all got to come together, and that's what I'm here for, and that's what we're here for, Raider Nation. And this comes from Gary on Twitter, at Bad Boys with a Z7, at BADBOYZ7. Again, his name is Gary. Say, Q, we lost my son, Jason LaVogue, last Thursday. Please give him a shout out on the pod. We miss him beyond measure and are heartbroken. Godspeed, son. Hashtag once a Raider, always a Raider. Thanks, Q. And Gary, again, at Bad Boys with a Z7. Thanks so much for the message. Thanks for passing it along, even though it's not something to celebrate and get excited about. But thank you for passing the message along to your extended family, which is Raider Nation. Just know, as I mentioned, through the good times, the bad times, the joking times, whatever the case may be, we're always here for each other. Raider Nation has been there for me when I went through the same thing that you're going through. It doesn't get any easier, but knowing that you have people that love and support and have your back and you can lean on is always going to be helpful. And this show was major for me in helping me kind of navigate through the waters through the initial period of time when I lost my son to a car accident. And again, I don't know the details of what happened with your son. We don't need to know the details. We just know that it's something that we never want to have to be talking about as a parent having to lose their child. It's just it's very unfortunate. It's something that we never want to happen or occur. But we're here with you, Gary. We're here with your family. And if there's anything that you need, any kind of support or whatever like that, man, you could always hit us up, and we'll do whatever we can for you and the family. But thanks for sharing that with us, and just know that we got your back. Before we get into some sounds from Marvin Lewis from Wednesday's OTAs, I did want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Now, as mentioned, wanted to hear from assistant head coach Marvin Lewis. I think he's a real good addition to Antonio Pierce's staff. I think he's going to really help out in a major way as we continue to see AP grow as a head coach. He told us his worst day was going to be November 1st, and I think we can all agree his worst day as a head coach was November 1st, and he continued to grow. Did he make mistakes along the way? Sure, but to have the wherewithal and the humility to be able to reach out to guys like a Marvin Lewis, like a Adam Gase, like a Tom Coughlin, and say, hey, can you just kind of look over my shoulder and see what I'm doing and give me some feedback and see what you think? I think that goes a very long way and tells you a lot about AP and the kind of guy he is. But Marvin Lewis obviously knows him really well, coached him up when he was in Washington as an undrafted free agent. So one of the first questions was asked. Matter of fact, I got to ask Marvin Lewis about Antonio Pierce and when it was he knew that AP was head coach material.
Well, I don't know that then. I knew he was driven as a player, and I said that to him in 2021 at ASU when he became the coordinator, and we flipped roles, and I went back off the field, and he came to me during the bye week, and he said, "How am I doing?" I said, "Man, you're doing really good, but you also need to take some time for yourself and take a deep breath as well." But he's so driven, and I said, "That's how you became such a great player, is you're just so driven." And he also, I think based on how things happened in the fall and so forth, once he took over and reaching out to Coach Coughlin, reaching out to myself and the people that he had come in and be around, and just so he could bounce ideas off of, he's not stuck on himself that way. He wants to hear other people's point of views and so forth that way, and that's good. But he has a great direction himself, as a leader. He takes responsibility for providing the direction and reinforcing it each and every day.
So didn't really know exactly when he knew he was head coach material, just knew the kind of person he was, the attention to detail. You hear how Marvin Lewis breaks it down and what he what he thinks about the job that he's doing, and thought about the job that AP was doing from a distance, as AP was obviously leaning on him quite a bit. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What about the job I'm doing? So, I mean, obviously he cares so much about the team, cares so much about being successful. And that's what drove him to be a successful player. And that's why I believe he's going to be a very successful head coach for the Silver and Black. One thing that we hear Antonio Pierce talk about all the time is changing of the culture. That's obviously something that Marvin Lewis had to do as well in Cincinnati. I mean, think about it. When he arrived in Cincinnati, and he did turn them into a consistent playoff team. Now, did they have a ton of playoff success? No, but they got to the playoffs. They were a dumpster fire before Marvin Lewis showed up there. So I asked him a question about what it takes to change the culture, which is obviously something he had to do when he got to Cincinnati.
I think the first part of that is getting the right people in that locker room with you, alongside you. And that was the one thing I thought was really evident here last season, is the best players worked extremely hard on the field, and that's contagious. And that builds from the bottom up, and that's what you need. You need your leadership to be out there on the field, because we can't go out there in the huddle with them. And I think that was the same thing true is bringing the right kind of people in and so forth as you continue to build the roster and build the football team. But there's already a great nucleus here, and we're able to continue to build upon that because these guys that are here are really driven that way, and there's a lot of energy that way.
We always hear coaches, whenever they come in new, say, I got to change the culture. I got to change the culture. I got to change the culture. It really feels like, to me, Raider Nation, that AP has successfully changed the culture, and it goes back to what you just heard Marvin Lewis say. You've got to have the right guys in the locker room. You've got to have the guys in the locker room be those leaders and want to change the culture. And the good thing for the Raiders is they have number 98. Right, 98 is a culture changer. Right, he's a guy that wants to be the tone setter. He's the guy that wants to make sure that this team is successful and gets back to winning ways. And the way that he goes is the standard for the Silver and Black. He is definitely the face of the franchise, and he's got all those players in the locker room bought in with what he's doing as well. And that goes a very long way. So if they go as Max Crosby goes, that is a really good thing. Speaking of Max Crosby, Marvin Lewis was asked about the same traits that he saw with some of the Hall of Famers that he had an opportunity to coach up, like the Rod Woodsons, like the Shannon Sharps, like the Ray Lewis. Does he see some of those same traits in those guys and see them in Max Crosby now as those guys that he saw that are now in the Hall of Fame and have those gold jackets?
I do. I see a driven player, I also had the opportunity to be around Bruce Smith and Darryl Green for a season. And, you see guys in Champ Bailey. You see guys that have become at the pinnacle, Shannon Sharp, of their game and how they go about their business each and every day. And you can set your watch by Max Crosby now. Somebody said it'd be easy to assassinate him because you know where he's going to be at all times. And, he's phenomenal. And, being over there in Arizona, I got to spend a lot of time over with the Cardinals and watching J.J. Watt at the end of his career and the very last practice J.J. Watt had for the Arizona Cardinals, he looked like Max Crosby looks every day out here. And I think, to me, that shows you what a great player is like. You know, I was influenced as a young coach in the NFL by Rod Woodson, and then later was fortunate enough to draft Ray Lewis. And then we brought Shannon Sharp. So I've been watching how these guys who've become, Hall of Fame players, how they go about and go about.
And I
their
think
day
that we all
each and every day.
realize the potential
Max
that
has
Max
those
has. I think
qualities.
we all realize that Max has Hall of Fame written all over him as long as he keeps up with what he's doing. Obviously, you've got to stay healthy. Obviously, you've got to play for a long amount of time. There's certain parameters that you got to hit. But if there's one guy that has the ability to do that and has the drive to want to be that guy, it would be Mad Max Crosby. Going back to the culture, the tone setter, that guy, that's Max Crosby. And you hear what Marvin Lewis has to say, like, yeah, all those guys, Ray Lewis, Rod Woodson, Shannon Sharp, they all have the same skill set and the same mindset as Max Crosby, and he sees it each and every day in Mad Max at the Raiders facility. The final soundbite that I want you to hear from Marvin Lewis, and it was really good talking to him. We talked to him for about 15 or 16 minutes on Wednesday. I thought it was some really good stuff. You can always go back to Raiders.com and listen to the whole thing. Check out the Raiders YouTube page. They have that as well. But Adam Hill from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, he's also on the sister station that I'm at in Vegas, ESPN Las Vegas. He's on Cofield and Company. You'll hear him ask the question to Coach Lewis about Jack Jones. And I want to leave the question in because the way that Coach Lewis laughs when he asks him the question, it kind of all goes hand in hand. It wouldn't sound right if you didn't hear the question. So here's Adam Hill asking about Jack Jones.
You talked about some of the players in the past, how they compared to Max Crosby. A guy like Jack Jones that will make a play and then tell you about how he made that play. What does that bring to kind of the rest of the defense?
We want to have some consistency of things, and, we're trying to iron Jackie out a little bit, all the time. He's a very talented player, and I've had the pleasure, as I told him again, Jack, it's been 5 years now. And let's move on. Let's move to step B. We're still on step A, but he's a very talented young man. He has a knack for making football plays. And, he just has that about him. And I think it's just learning, still in the process, learning to be a pro day in and day out. And I think that's important. And I think, but his teammates know what they're going to get out there on the field, and we just got to make sure we keep all of those things positive all the time. I remember at the end of the season, he made just a great play in the Denver game where he came across and tipped the ball in the end zone. The next play, he didn't move. And that's the thing. It's this is a tough. You play it. That's a position. It's the toughest position on the field. I mean, you got to cover a guy that you can't touch. He knows where he's going, and you can't touch him. Other than that, it's easy.
Love the fact that, Marvin Lewis has been around Jack Jones for so long, right? He knows him so well, just like AP knows him so well. And is he a little edgy? Yes. Is there times where you're like, wait, hold on, what the hell just happened? Is there, plays that, you might get a little frustrated? Yes. But the dude is a hell of a player. He makes plays. He's got a great mentality. I love the edge that he brings to the table. He was out there on Wednesday, flying around. You can hear him. He was letting everyone know that he was there. Every time he made a play, you heard about it. It was really it was nice to see. And we'll talk about the practice in general, what my biggest takeaways were from it. And again, we'll talk about the 3 C's coming up in segment number 2. But I wanted to make sure to point out what Marvin Lewis had to say about Jack Jones, because he is that alpha in that secondary room for the silver and black. Nate Hobbs is definitely that guy as well. Obviously, we're waiting to see who steps up on the other side across. Could it be Ja'Cory Bennett? Could it be Brandon Faison? Could it be a combination of the two? Who knows? But we know Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs, they're solidified at their spot. And I think you're going to see some really good things with Jack Jones. I feel like he fits really well with this team. And again, as long as the coaching staff knows how to, communicate with him, as long as he understands what he needs to do as far as being a player goes and what the expectations are, I'm fine with him being a little edgy. I like it. I think the defense, especially that cornerback room, definitely needs that. So that's all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. As mentioned, coming up in segment number 2, we're going to talk about the 3 C's: continuity, consistency, and camaraderie. and how it won the day at OTAs on Wednesday. That's coming up next in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. And we know that the NBA Finals is right around the corner. It gets started on June 6th. The Celtics have punched their ticket. Is it going to be the Mavs? Is it going to be the Timberwolves? Well, Game 5 is going to be later on this evening. I think it's going to go to a Game 6 at least. And then after it gets to Game 6, then all bets are off, right? We've never seen a team come back from a 3-0 deficit in the Western Conference Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals either. It was 155-0. If they get up 3-0, 155 times they've won, 0 times has that team lost the series. So most likely it's going to be the Celtics and the Mavs. And if you're in the DF Dub area and you want to go to the finals, or if you're in Boston, you want to go to the finals, or hell, you're anywhere in the country and you want to go to the finals in either one of those cities, you can do that with Gametime. And the good thing is you don't have to get your tickets right now. You can wait until Game 1, June 6th. You can wait till, right before Game 2, whatever the case may be, because Gametime has great last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports. Hell, they have concerts, comedy, theater, whatever the case may be, they've got that. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Plus, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Right now, what do you need to do? I'm glad you asked. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms will apply. Again, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about the 3 C's. What are the 3 C's? Continuity, consistency, and camaraderie, and how they won the day on Wednesday at Raiders OTAs, the day that we were able to be out there. We'll be out there again next week. And then, of course, mandatory minicamp is around the corner. Then there'll be a nice little break. And then we'll be in Costa Mesa getting ready for training camp. And that's when it gets real. And again, not taking too much from OTAs, practices without pads, right? I mean, it's really, they're just kind of starting to do their installs. They're doing a little 7-on-7. They're doing some 11-on-11. They're doing a lot of individual drills. But I'll tell you right now, they're doing it with a sense of urgency and a sense of purpose. And on Wednesday, the defense was shining, right? And again, I don't want to get too high and say that this is going to be the number 1 defense in the league, but you could tell where the continuity kicks in, where the consistency kicks in, and the camaraderie, right? Continuity. They returned 10 of 11 starters. 10 of 11 starters come back. That's rare in the free agency era. That's very rare. The Raiders bring all of their guys back on defense outside of Bilal Nichols. Bilal Nichols, who was a starter in 2023, is in Arizona. So who's in his spot? Oh, just this guy named Christian Wilkins. You may have heard of him. He's pretty good, right? Defensive tackle from formerly of Miami, right? Now with the Raiders, and he's side by side with Max Crosby. He's definitely an upgrade. So, yeah, they bring back 10 of 11 starters, and they upgrade the position. And, oh, by the way, they bring Jack Jones back, who's going to be the starter on one side for the entire season as opposed to just half the season. But just having that continuity with the players allows them to have camaraderie with each other, right? So that's 2 of the 3 C's right there that are already kicking in, and they know what each other is capable of doing, right? We talked to Jack Jones following practice, and he said, man, camaraderie is big, right? We've got to have that, right? We've got to be able to go out there with our brothers that we trust, right? That's a big thing. The communication. They know how to communicate with each other because they've been around each other, right? I talk about the consistency. That's another C. Consistency, continuity, camaraderie, whatever way you want to put it. The consistency and the continuity as far as the coaching, right? Patrick Graham is in his 3rd year as a defensive coordinator for the Silver and Black. How often have they had coaches that have been around that long? Right, that's a great thing. Hopefully they get to a point where they have that continuity in the front office as well, where they're not consistently changing guys. But, on the field, you're seeing it. The offense, it struggled on Wednesday, right? There's no other way to put it. There was balls that were batted down. There was guys that were making plays on the ball, like a Brandon Faison was shooting the gap and knocking balls down. There was a ball that was tipped up in the air and intercepted and taken back to the house. There was a play where the running back got through. It was Alexander Madison, as a matter of fact. He got through, had a nice little run, and one of the defenders came up and punched the ball out from behind, and the Raiders picked it up. Malcolm Coons picked it up and was able to take it to the house. All things that they've been working on in the individual drills before they do their 7-on-7 or 11-on-11, and that was during the 11-on-11 process. But things I wanted to stand out. Again, the communication has been fantastic. When they line up, you hear these guys talking to each other, whether it's the linebackers, Robert Spillane talking to the back end, whether it's the back end talking to the front end, if it's Christian Wilkins in the middle talking to Max, whatever the case may be, you hear it loud and clear. They're communicating in a major way, and they're flying around. They're flying around to the ball. No matter what the offense did, and there was a lot of plays that, the ball fell to the ground, incompletions, as I mentioned, balls batted down. Even when they had plays that might have been, swing passes just to get the ball out of O'Connell's hands or Minshew's hands and get it into a playmaker's hands, they didn't go for anything. Like, there were so many times that the Raiders defense was able to string out the offense, sideline to sideline. Yeah, the guy was running with the ball for a lot. Right? A guy like Amir Abdullah, a guy like Zamir White, a guy like Alexander Madison, right? Other guy, Michael Mayer. These guys, they ran. Brock Bowers were running, but they weren't getting too much positive yards because the defender was right there. They were just stringing it out. And if you can't drop them for a loss, have a minimal gain. There was a lot of minimal gains on Wednesday at OTA. So just flying around and understanding what they're supposed to do. Max and Christian, they're leading the way. They're leading in every single drill, right? And then they're even competing against each other, right? Whenever it's one-on-ones and they'll line up two guys side by side and have them do it at the same time, it's always 98-94, 98-94. They always start things off. Then Tyree, and, it's obviously with starters, but those are the alpha dogs, and they set the tone. There was one drill that they were doing that I thought was a really good drill individually, and Max did a good rep. And I tweeted this out. You can check it out at your boy Q254 on Twitter. I tweeted it out. Max did a good rep with Christian, but he didn't like it. He didn't think it was good enough. So he went and got in front of Tyree and said, look out, let me do another one. And so he went again. But that just shows you, again, going back to the standard, going back to the tone that Max sets, like, just good is not good enough. Right? It's got to be done correctly. It's got to be done great. It's got to be done with a sense of urgency, and he wants to do it right. So they are definitely the leaders. Everything that they do defensively, I spend a lot of time with the defense. I do, just because I enjoy seeing what they're doing and the way that they're getting better. On practice on Wednesday, there was a ton of drills that were focused on the ball. Right? I mean, when they're out there and they're doing, like I said, their individual drills, even though they're doing it as a group, there was a lot of punching the ball out. There was one drill that they were running where two defensive players would line up next to each other, like just say Max and Christian Wilkins. Rob Leonard was a defensive line coach. He'd snap the ball and point a certain direction, and you'd either have to go left or right, depending on which way he went. And so Max and Christian would take off. Say they went left. They'd have to run left, and they'd be chasing the guy that has the ball as well. One guy catches up to the dude, punches the ball out. The other guy scoops it and goes. Right? And you could see them working together. Like, say Max knocked the ball out, Christian Wilkins would pick it up and start taking it back to the house. Max is up blocking for him. So they're all doing everything that they can to go get the ball. Linebackers did drills where they were shedding blockers, right? They had the sleds out there as the blockers. Shed those guys. Go get the ball that's rolling on the ground. It's a fumble. Go get the ball. They're so focused on going and getting the ball. The secondary doing drills to go get the ball. It was a focus last year. It is a focus times 100 this year, just based off what I was able to see. But it's all because they're not thinking anymore. They know what the standard is. Yes, there's some new coaches there, but the players are all the same. The scheme, more importantly, is all the same. The confidence and the belief is there, right? These players are seeing and trusting what they're seeing. They're trusting and being able to just go react, as opposed to, is that really what I'm seeing? Is that really what I'm seeing? And I mentioned it last time. That screen, those screens that they have off to the side of the practice field or by the cold tank, I mean, those are game changers, the way that they're able to go and do some instant teaching and go and looking at film in real time and saying, okay, this is what you need to do here. Hey, here's Gerald Alexander, the safeties coach, talking to Trayvon Merrick, talking to Marcus Epps, right? Talking to Chris Smith, talking to Isaiah Palomau, hey, this is what we need you to do. Trey Taylor, this is what we need you to do in this situation. And not only that, the guys that are older dudes are able to teach the younger guys as well, or is able to, kind of coach up the rookies as well. And just breaking on the ball. Again, that was something that I thought was a big deal. There was times where you saw Jack Jones make plays. I mentioned Brandon Faison, him making plays. Jacorian Bennett looked like he was looking pretty good out there as well. Obviously, again, it's early. There's no pads. There was a few times where the corners would blitz, the safety would blitz. I saw Trayvon Merrick would have had multiple sacks on Aiden O'Connell. It's just, again, these guys are just, I say all the time, bloodthirsty pirates. They're flying around the field like bloodthirsty pirates. And what does that come back to? Why is it so good? Why does it look good right now? Besides the fact that it's May and it's not a game, right? It's just practice and they're just getting lathered up. But it all goes back to the 3 C's that I was talking about: continuity, consistency, and camaraderie. If you have that coordinator there in place for a long time, if you have a scheme that's proven to work like it did in 2023, it makes things a lot easier when you go out there. These players are excited to go out there and continue to build off what they did last season and show that it wasn't a fluke and it could be, the long lasting. And then the camaraderie, to be around your brothers, love on those guys, right? Want to go to work with those guys, want to fight with those guys, right? Hearing Max talking trash to Gardner Minshew and talking trash to Aiden O'Connell, right? And hearing guys like Christian Wilkins back him up, and Jack Jones, he never stopped talking, right? I mean, Jack was on it from the minute that he got out there at practice. You knew where he was at all times just because you could hear him. So, I mean, it's just, again, the defense, we already knew was going to be, the strength of the team, just like it was the strength of the team a season ago. And, as I mentioned on my radio show, they're probably going to do the heavy lifting for the Raiders when the season starts because they are ahead of the curve, right? The offense is going to be a work in progress. They've got to get good, consistent quarterback play and good offense, right? They have the players, but with that good, consistent quarterback play, they can actually have a successful offense to complement that defense that looks to be really, really good in 2024, just based off of the fact that they understand what they're doing. They're flying around. They're looking for the ball, and not a whole bunch of plays are being made. Again, not against a different opponent. It's not preseason. It's not a game, so don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I do believe the steps that they're taking are the positive steps. I like what I see. Coming up in segment number 3, what's on your mind? 707-654-4693. It's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll hear from you next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with a text from LA Raiders Steve. He says, Q, what's happening, my brother? Great show. Always my first listen of the day as I start my route. So all the talks have been about our draft picks, who's going to play quarterback, our offensive line, who's going to play quarterback, our defense, and who's going to play quarterback. But what's up with our running back room? My opinion, losing Josh was monumental, and there hasn't really been a whole lot of talk about who's going to replace that void. Is it A, Zamir White, B, Alexander Madison, C, Dylan Lobby, or D, all of the above? We're definitely going to need a strong run game to help whoever gets a nod at quarterback. Just win, baby. That's LA Raiders Steve from Pico Rivera. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, that goes back to the conversation that I was having on the show on Wednesday about the 2 areas of concern that I still have: running backs and the cornerback room. The cornerback room is only slight just because I know what Jack Jones brings to the table. I know what Nate Hobbs brings to the table. I just don't know who's across from Jack. The running back room is a big mystery. I think Zamir White, as we got a chance to talk to him, he said he's excited and fired up for the challenge. I think Alexander Madison could be a nice compliment to him. He tried to be the lead back in Minnesota. That didn't work out. But I do think that those 2 guys can complement each other, but we haven't seen it. I think losing Josh Jacobs is a big deal as well. Some people tell me, well, you're just a Josh Jacobs fan. And I am. I'm not going to apologize for that. I don't think there's a problem with that. He was a hell of a player for the Silver and Black, one of the best running backs they've had in the history of the team. Right? And, of course, they've got bigger names, but you go back and look at the numbers. Josh Jacobs did some really good things for the Silver and Black. Can Zamir White, can, Alexander Madison, Dylan Lobby, how much can they fill the void of Josh Jacobs? Well, we'll find out, but unfortunately we can't find out until they put the pads on. Right now, from what I saw on Wednesday, that's not going to do too much good. As Luke Getsy told me, all the running backs are fast, they're all strong, they're all excited, and they're all having fun right now. We won't know anything about them until they put the pads on. And there's really nothing else I can say about that, but you bring up a good point. Definitely a storyline to watch during training camp. Up next, got a call from Southwest Florida Raider. He's calling to respond to Kale about AP and about AP and what he has brought to the table as a head coach and how it translates into wins. Here he is, Southwest Florida Raider.
Q. Southwest Florida Raider again. And I'm calling in response to Kale. Apparently I ruffled some feathers. It is interesting, though, how only part of my call was mentioned, not the entire context of the call. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So I guess 5-4 is good enough to crown AP as, quote, the man. I think that's laughable. He also questioned whether I watched any games last season. I sure did. I guess he must have been watching something different when he missed a lot of questionable in-game calls that AP made. I get it. Rookie coach, thrust into a position he inherited. He also inherited a dysfunctional team. And he has made positive, considerable changes, without a doubt. That I do not question. Here's also an interesting nugget. In the last 5 years, 23 out of the 34 head coaches hired in the NFL were offensive-minded coaches, offensive coordinators, etc. 10 were former defensive coordinators and 1 special teams coach. I just don't think AP, who's a defensive-minded coach, can get AOC or Minshew to play at a level to consistently beat Mahomes, Allen, Tua, Herbert, Lawrence, Lamar. And like I said, I hope I'm wrong. It's going to take double-digit wins to make the playoffs in the AFC. And with our quarterbacks and a question mark, again, my opinion, at head coach, I'm not seeing it. I'm also not sold on Getsy. This team is absolutely moving in the right direction roster-wise. But for me, the jury is still out on AP. Raiders. Peace out. Love your show.
Thanks for the call, my man. And we can go back and forth on this every day, this subject, right? We can go back and what AP has done, what he hasn't done. We could definitely do that and debate it every single day. And believe me, we've had some shows where we've debated some conversations many days. But the facts are the facts. As far as the 5-4 down the stretch is what they were, right? That's nothing to celebrate. But in a short amount of time, given the circumstances, saying that there was a first-time head coach put in place on November 1st. He had 9 games to try to figure out something, try to keep that locker room together and actually pull them together and give them a sense of hope. I think that was job well done. I can't get mad at him. He said that, his worst day as a head coach was going to be the first day. It was. He clearly got better. I know that you know that. He got better. Does that mean that he's going to turn into a super successful coach? No, but I would give him a chance. Everyone got to start to begin with. I don't understand why, the such a negative feel about the guy when, as far as I'm concerned, he's given Raider Nation more hope than a handful of the last few coaches that they've had. I mean, really, Jack Del Rio, before he got the contract extension, John Gruden the second time when he returned, okay, gave a little bit of hope, but we all know how that went. At first, especially, it was really tough sledding out of the gates. And he had a long, long contract. If it hadn't been for those emails, we all know how that shook out. He'd still be the head coach. I just think the AP has an opportunity to do some really good things. I mean, again, he's brought in some good guys to assist him, like a Marvin Lewis has long-time history in the NFL as a head coach. He's brought in guys like Tom Coughlin to help. He's brought in, Joe Philbin, guy who's had head coach experience. He's brought in a bunch of players to help out on the coaching staff as well. I mean, look, if it fails, it's going to fail. But it's worth a try. And again, he's given, most importantly, not only Raider Nation hope, he's giving those guys in the locker room hope. So that's where I'm at as far as AP goes. And I do go back to believing that, yes, it translates into wins. Is it where you want to be right now? No. But, 9 games that he had outside of going, 6-3, 7-2 and making it to the playoffs, I mean, that wouldn't have, nothing was going to get where you wanted to go, right? There's a reason why the coach got fired, on Halloween night, because the team wasn't doing what it was supposed to do and the culture wasn't right. Now, as far as defensive-minded head coaches go, as opposed to offensive-minded, I don't buy all that stuff. And I'm trying to be as respectful as possible, but I just think that that's a silly concept. I understand what you're saying, but if you just go back and look at the division champs, and we've been talking about it in the AFC, Buffalo, Baltimore, Houston, and KC, Buffalo, defensive-minded head coach. Baltimore, special teams coach. Houston, defensive-minded head coach. Kansas City, offensive-minded head coach, back-to-back champ, obviously. Cleveland and Miami as wild cards, offensive offensive-minded head coaches right there. Pittsburgh, defensive-minded head coach as a wild card as well. So, it's you can say all you want about offensive coaches aren't doing this, that, and the other, or defensive coaches aren't doing this, that, and the other, but obviously they can win. And as long as and on top of that, AP is a more of a leader, right? Again, I mean, you got to look a little bit beyond just a certain title. He's really more of a leader, similar to what the Lions have in Dan Campbell. I don't think anyone in Detroit's like, yeah, you can't win with this guy, right? He's not an offensive-minded head coach. Did he play offense? Sure, but he's more of a leader, right? He's not really, that hands-on with the team as far as the offense goes. He's just a big-time leader, which is what AP is. So I think that we don't need to label these guys. I just think that when you see a good coach, you see a good coach. And it looks like that's what the Raiders have in Antonio Pierce. And look, the proof is in the pudding. He's going to have 17 games to prove it, right? And hopefully he'll earn more. But after the season, if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, if the Raiders look more like, what the betting odds are saying that they're going to be, a 6-win team, a 6.5-win team, whatever the over-under is, depending on which way the wind is blowing, then maybe you're right. Okay, maybe it was, it was more hype than it was, actual production. But let's give it a chance. I mean, what do we have to lose at this point, right? Again, I mean, I feel like he's giving me hope. Maybe I'm out on the island by myself, but I like what AP is doing, and I liked what AP was doing about 3 weeks into him as an interim. And anyone who's been listening to me for a long time knows that I never, ever support hiring the interim head coach because normally it's not real. But I felt in my gut that AP was the real deal very early on once he became the interim head coach. Just was something about what he was able to do with not only the team in the locker room, but the building that I visit and spend a lot of time in. So, I mean, I saw it firsthand. I saw what it was like for the presence that he felt over the media, right? It was just different. And again, the media is not going to ever win you any games. I'm not going to win you any games. But it's just certain people are just natural born leaders and they get the most out of their guys. Just like John Harbaugh in Baltimore, special teams coach, just a natural born leader. It's just fantastic at that. Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season, just a natural born leader. It's just that simple. But thanks so much for that call. I definitely appreciate you. We got time for one more text. We'll take it from Mike from Texas Hill Country. He says, Q, it's Mike from Texas Hill Country. First, I agree with you and most of your listeners that Aiden will be our starter. I do believe he'll take that next step and be a good quarterback for the Raiders this year with the potential to progress farther. He has always worked for what he's gotten. That said, has Gardner Minshew ever had offensive weapons like we have to play with? I don't have a clue as to what he has done at his previous stops. I do like both of them on our team for the next few years while we figure it out. That's Mike from Texas Hill Country. And thanks for the text, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, man, that's the thing. Aiden has some really good weapons, but Gardner does too. And Gardner had some weapons in Indianapolis last year, but it wasn't like what the Raiders have. He had some weapons in Philadelphia when he was backing up Jalen Hurts, but he didn't really play that much when he was backing up Jalen Hurts. He had a couple of weapons here and there in Jacksonville, but not like what the Raiders have. So you're absolutely right. No, he's never had weapons like they have. He's never had that kind of team, and honestly, don't think he's had a defense that he's has been complimenting him like the Raiders have either. I definitely believe this is probably the best team on paper that Gardner Minshew's been on. Difference is you don't win. You don't win games on paper. You got to go out there and do it on the field. So, again, I think Aiden O'Connell will be day one starter September 8th when they're in L.A. at SoFi Stadium taking on the Chargers. I do believe it'll be Aiden O'Connell under center. But, again, he's got to go out there and earn it. And he's earning it during OTAs. He's going to earn it during mandatory minicamp. He's going to have to earn it during training camp and preseason. And if he can, then it'll be his job. If he can't, then Gardner Minshew will be there. Obviously, he's really good insurance, and there's a reason why the Raiders made him a priority to go get him early in free agency. Thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. That's all I got time for on today's show. Got a call from Wine Country Raider we'll get tomorrow, a call from Omar in El Paso, a text from my guy Raider Mike in Vegas, and we'll hear from more. Plus, we'll have more news and notes. We'll have plenty of conversation as well as we continue with the party here along the week here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Can't believe it's going to be Friday already. Had the short week because of Memorial Day, and here we are already looking at the weekend. So this is how we do, Raider Nation. So hopefully you've been enjoying yourself and enjoying the shows. Until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, Just win, baby.